It's nice to be here. I think it's my fourth time. I actually spoke at the first one, which was something like 12 years ago. So it's been a while. So I work as a consultant. I focus on improving architecture and developer tooling for different kind of teams, from startups to Fortune 500. And you might know some of the open source tools that I created because they're used by over 80,000 applications, like things like Sorcery. And I've led the New York Times for almost 6 years. And today I'm going to talk about something different. I usually talk about very technical subjects, so which makes it really, really easier than this, because technical subjects, like I've been programming for 28 years now, so I know pretty well what I'm doing when it comes to coding. When it comes to balance, I am all but that. So this talk is very different. And I called it the art of balanced life, but in reality, it wasn't really the art of balanced life that I described. It was more of a search that I started doing. And the reason I started thinking about subjects like financial independence, burnout, and work-life balance was because I was anything but for majority of my commercial or work life. And as I started mentoring a lot of the younger engineers, I have a bunch of friends that are 10 years or even younger than that, than me, I started thinking about what advice would I like to give them? And in my case, the story was that I worked full-time since the first year of university, and I was still studying in the full capacity, so I wasn't like an after hours. I was at university and going to work pretty much all the time. And the longest break I had for the first 14 years of my commercial career has been 10 days when I didn't program, so not very healthy. And for most of the time, I worked 60, 80 hours every single week as I worked on my own projects, commercial, full-time job, studies, blogging, open sourcing, then speaking at conferences. And I was able to avoid lifestyle inflation, which will be very important. At some point, I was even spending just like as little as 9% of my income. But it's all extremes: extreme work, extreme savings. There is no balance in it. So when I was in my late 20s, I had a year when I made the most money back then, and was like winning at a lottery. I made over 1,000,000 zloty, and I should have been happy because I made so much money in 1 year. But the reality hit me, and I thought back, like I even had to check my tax returns because I was like, am I tracking this wrong? I was 26 or so, 27, something like that. And I looked back at that year and I realized I only remembered like 3 days from that year that I did something fun that was not work. And I realized that is no way to live. So I asked myself a question: what if I worked a bit less, earned like 20, 30% less, but actually had time to spend the money and enjoy life more? So that's how my search for a more balanced life began. And last year, I left my full-time job. I worked at the browser company when I left in May, and I originally was excited to start working on my own projects. So I left, me and my girlfriend went to Italy for 2 weeks, and I was in Italy and I didn't have my idea of working on my laptop, but I was like so eager to get back to Poland and start coding on all the indie ideas that I had for years. And then after like 10 days of not coding and actually, just getting in the mindset of I actually left full-time job, I realized I don't want to code. Like I was not really doing any programming for like 2 months because I was so burned out. Today I work around up to 6 hours per day, and I try to balance it between consulting and some indie stuff that I'm working on. And this allowed me to experience more interesting life, because now I only focus on working very efficiently in as little time as possible. And so maybe like 30 hours per week. That's probably the top I did in the last year. And I recently was in Argentina for 40 days with one of my close friends. And it would not be possible. Like in theory, I could go and work remotely, but in reality, I would never feel like I can, because I had obligations and work, and like I need to be available, and the time zone difference, all this stuff. But I was able to do it because of this new idea of like working less and enjoying stuff more. So what I want to mention is like 3 main areas that are all intertwined with each other. One is thinking how you design your lifestyle. The other is financial independence, and they together create the idea of work-life balance. Because if you figure out those two well, work-life balance becomes a lot easier than you might have thought so before. And I want to preface this that if you are here, you're probably in very privileged industry. IT can earn a lot more than a lot of other industries. I always say this when I talk about money and the earning potential for engineers, because some engineers think they're God's children just because they can program. I disagree with that very much. A lot of people work very hard and they can never earn the kind of money we can, so we're very lucky. But this also means you have to think about savings and frugality slightly different than some other people. So let's start with lifestyle design, because that is like, as I was going through my career and I was going through therapy, I was contemplating a lot how I wanted to live my life, how it should look in the end, like what is the end goal. So the idea of lifestyle design is consciously planning your life to optimize it for happiness, for well-being, productivity, whatever tickles your boat. And this can include things like being able to work on passion projects or being able to spend time with your loved ones. So it's pretty wide area, right? And what I found over the years, it's a lot easier to think what you don't want than to know what you want. And it's the same with relationships. As you go through relationships, you realize, well, this is not something I'm going to accept, and you still might not know what you really want. So when I wrote this exercise of like what I don't want to do in my life, I don't want to commute to the office. Like, it's nice to have the option to go to the office, but I don't want to be forced to be in the office because that has time for my travel. So I'm no longer working 8 hours. I actually need to get there and back, which probably is something like 9 hours per day. I don't really like losing control of my schedule. A lot of companies have this tendency to book meetings everywhere and have 20 different stand-ups in a week, which just makes you extremely productive as an engineer. I don't ever want to be denied vacation. Like, if there's like a good deal for like a last-minute vacation, I want to be able to go. I would never want to miss family events. Like, if I have kids and there's like a play my daughter or my son would be taking part in, like, I cannot imagine like not going. That just sounds ridiculous. And I really don't want to work with toxic people. This is something I learned over the years, because when I started programming, I was a decent programmer when I started working full-time, but I was a terrible team player. So I know what toxic people look like, because I used to be one when I was younger. And now, there's idea that I really believe in, and it's that in life, experiences matter far more than ownership. And the aim of my life is to just build a lot of memories, build a lot of experiences, learn a lot of stuff, try a lot of stuff. And there's a conventional wisdom that says that people save for later. Oh, I'm going to save this amount of money, and then when I'm 50, I'm going to retire, and just postponing everything. But that doesn't really consider a lot of the things, because the resources you have today make it a lot easier to experience stuff that you might not be able to do later. So there are like two curves in your life. One is your net worth, which in theory should be increasing every year as you work, keep increasing your salary, keep increasing your role. But there is your health. And as much as you can train, eat healthy, be vegan, be carnivore, whatever, your health will be declining. Unfortunately, we all die at some point. So we have these two curves that compete with each other, our net worth and our health. So when we create things like bucket lists, that's very common, like, oh, I have this bucket list, I want to do this and this and that. You have to think about it in decades of life. Because when I am 20, 30, 40, I can jump from airplanes, I can ride cross bikes, I can do a lot of crazy stuff because my health is pretty decent. I don't think I'm going to ride cross bikes when I'm 70. As much as I'd like to take care of my health, that seems unlikely, but I can go to theater when I'm 70. So you have to prioritize what you want to do and plan it according to your decades of your life. And this is really important. And when you think about it, it's all about finding the right balance. Again, it's a key word. I got a tattoo in Argentina to remind me about balance. And for me, I think that if you have to choose, right? If you have to choose, I can buy the newest iPhone, or I can go on a family trip with my family or with my friends. I think that trip will create so much more memories and joy and satisfaction that I'm going to remember for years to come. I'm not going to remember which fucking iPhone I had. I had so many different devices, so many different gadgets over the years. I have no remembrance of like what was the version, what was the model. And if you consider the cost, like the new iPhone that I had to get for work was like 8,000 zlotys. That's like a really decent trip. And so yeah, it's really important, especially if you start thinking about family. Is your kid gonna remember that you bought them the newest game or the newest console, and you never had time for them? Or are they gonna value like the trips and the experiences you do with them? I think that's really, like for me, as I started thinking about starting family, that become a very high priority. So making sure that, I prioritize the right things. So I did this exercise, and I recommend anyone does it. So when you get home and you have some free time, think about how you want to live. If money is not an object, right? Think about the end goal lifestyle. So don't consider what's your current situation. It's more about, okay, if I make it, if my startup or my company is successful or whatever, how do I actually want to live? So this is what I wrote for myself. So I want to have at least one active personal project. I want to control my schedule, like most of it. Lots of sunshine. I freaking hate winter. I want to have time with family and friends. Zero toxic people, travel a lot, and be fit and healthy. It's actually not that hard to be in the top 1% or even 0.1% because people really don't take care of their mental and physical health. And from all that list, money is useful, but it's nowhere here. Like, I don't really care about driving Ferrari or Porsche. Like, that doesn't really make anything for me. It doesn't create any kind of, I need to do this to be successful or to be happy. So when I originally wrote this, I was like, I always had this idea that I'm gonna need a specific amount of money. And I always, that number kept moving. So I remember when I started doing the financial independence, the whole literature and trying to plan it. And I thought, well, okay, so if I make 2 million zlotys, I can retire, I can spend 5,000 zlotys per month, and I'm gonna be happy. And then as my net worth kept growing, my number kept growing. So it kept running away from me. It was 2, 3, 4, whatever the number. I realized that number will always keep going up, even though my expenses didn't go up, because I really don't spend that much money. And so a lot of the times you are chasing a moving target. And each year I had this thought in my head, this is the year I'm going to finish working full-time. I joined the Times and I said to myself, okay, this is my last full-time company. After I leave or they fire me, this is the end. Then I'm going to go back to indie, game dev, stuff like I really enjoy doing. But I stayed at the Times for 6 years, and the browser came to me. And before I left, I didn't decide to leave New York Times. The browser came to me, and they were like, "Oh, this is this project we're working on. Do you want to work on it?" And I did a contract with them, so I was working full time. And then I did 20 hours per week contract with the browser for 2 months. And I decided, okay, this is going to be cool. I love the product, and so I decided to join. I finished my work for the Times on Friday, and I joined the browser on Monday. I didn't even take time off. Again, not very balanced. But when I did that exercise and I wrote the lifestyle that I want to live, I realized I don't actually need that much money. I could start living the way I want to now. So how can you gain that freedom, right? You need to have financial independence. And this is a very common concept. It's not a new one. But money is not the end goal, right? Everyone realizes that money in itself is not the end goal. It's basically means to an end. Money gives us freedom. Freedom to choose what we want to work on, how much we want to work on, do whatever the hell we want, right? So there are two main concepts for financial independence, which is retirement. You can either lean retire or fat retire. Lean retire basically means you want to have kind of minimalistic lifestyle and save a lot. So depending on the country and the continent you live on, that number can differ. In States, it's very expensive. In Europe, it's average. And in Asia, you could live very easily. $25,000 per year, you would be so well off. And then there is the fat retirement, which is basically normal living, without worrying about money or trying to save by going to different shops and trying to find deals, all this stuff. but maybe not going crazy. So like owning a decent car, but maybe not a Ferrari. So there are like the two main roads that people choose to. Now, it's a balancing game, right? Like everything. Everything is a matter of choosing your right balance for you. It is very individual. So it's a question of how much should you save versus how much you should spend to enjoy your life. And if you do the same as I did and you start prioritizing experiences over ownership, you don't actually need that much money, because usually doing things like that are experiences. Like, for example, I joined improv classes, improv school here in Warsaw. And I don't remember how much it cost, but like one level, which is like you go like in normal school. So a semester was like 1,200 zlotys. For one iPhone, I have many years of learning and a lot of cool experiences. I highly recommend improv class. It's really fun and generates a lot of interesting skills as well that are actually useful in daily life. But the difference is huge. Buying like gadgets, like getting like I got PSVR 2 and I played it twice, and it cost like 2,000 zlotys. Right? It's waste of money, right? It's fun. I want to play more, but yeah, not great choice. And so there is also a matter of how are you thinking about your time. So a lot of people that are leaning towards the lean financial independence, they want to do everything on their own. They're gonna go on YouTube and learn how to fix their pipes or how to do their wiring in their house, right? All this stuff. But I don't think that's a smart thing to do for us in this industry, because our earning potential per hour is a lot higher than people that are manual labor. So you could do like a contract work for a few hours and earn 10 times as you're gonna spend on fixing the pipes, right? So you can always make more money, but you can never spend money to get back time. So if you're gonna just constantly try to, do everything yourself, you're sacrificing time for money, right? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of money, but I'm gonna do it all myself. But then I'm gonna spend 40, 80 hours, and even if like I do some side project and it explodes and it makes tons of money, I can never get back that time. So you have to consider how much you can make versus if it's fun for you to learn how to fix pipes, do it for the fun aspect. But I don't think it's very smart for us to be just doing everything manually and trying to save all the money. Like, I don't like cleaning. I get a cleaning lady every week to come to me. She earns money, so I help someone make their living, and I don't need to do something that I don't enjoy. And I buy courses, I buy components, because if someone spends a lot of time creating a tool that solves a problem I have, I could possibly do it. A lot of engineers have this idea, I'm going to do it myself. But it's going to cost you so much time. I come from a game dev background, and in Unity and Unreal, one of the main things is you have store components. You can spend $90 to get a physics engine. I actually wrote physics engines before. It takes a lot longer than you would have to pay me. Like $90 would not give you a lot of my time. So if I decided to write a physics engine just because I could do it, it would be a terrible investment, unless it's fun. If it's fun, then do it, but yeah. I can do it myself. So when it comes to numbers, there's this standard theory that if you save 25 times your annual expenses and you invest it at 4% over inflation, you have infinite money. That's the standard FI literature recommendation. So let's say you need to have 100,000 zlotys per year for your spending. If you save 2.5 million, then you can invest 4% over inflation. You get 4% every year. Your money never drops down, so you constantly have the same amount of money plus inflation, and you can just live forever on that money. There's a couple of problems with this. One of the problem is that it assumes that you will never make a single dollar from the moment you decide, I'm gonna retire, I'm gonna live on that money. That's a very wrong assumption for people in our kind of business and passion, right? Because one of the reasons that a lot of us want to retire or do indie stuff is because we have ideas and projects we want to work on. Or we want to take bigger risks. So maybe join this startup that is doing something really crazy. It might not work, but it's really fun. So in reality, what happens is a lot of the times people that actually have that freedom to work on the projects that excite them, that are risky, actually succeed. So you start earning more money, or even if you don't earn more money, you still earn money. So that assumption goes out of the window. And the other assumption is you actually want to die with the money that you started with. So let's say my number was 2.5 million. And if I follow this rule of 25 times and just getting 4% out of it, I die, let's say I'm 70, and I leave my kids 2.5 million. I mention kids because that's often an argument I hear from people. I don't think that's how I would want to live, because by the time we die, hopefully, our kids are grown, they have their own careers, and if we taught them right, they know how to make money, they know how to do all this stuff, right? That money wouldn't make that big of a difference for them, hopefully, right? If they're like 50 or 40, whatever, it shouldn't make that much of a difference. But if you spend that money when they were alive to build memories, to build experiences, to have better relationships with them, that is far more valuable, right? You want to leave a legacy. You want to be remembered. I think that's really important. So if you remove those two requirements, something becomes a lot easier, because you have two choices. You can either spend more money, so you can withdraw more than 4% and just die with zero. There's a book called Die with Zero that I recommend you read. Or you can just retire a lot earlier, because you don't need the 25 times your annual expenses. You can actually calculate. There's tons of calculators you can look at. But remember those two assumptions that everyone in financial independence just, assumes this is the way to go. That's actually not going to be true for majority of us. Especially the second one. Like, makes no sense to just leave a bag of money to 50-year-olds. Spend the money with the kids. So ideally, aim to die with zero money. You're still gonna have your apartment, stuff like that. So they're still gonna get something, like the kids. Not that it should matter, but I think it would be much better if you spend the money when you're alive and healthy to either do more risky stuff, try different business ideas that you might have some fun, build a lot of cool memories. And the thing is, it's a lot easier to take risk when you're younger than when you're older. Like our parents, like when I was leaving my full-time job, and I explained to my mother that I want to leave full-time. And the moment I told her, like, I'm going to leave the browser, and she's like, oh, don't you want to find another job before you leave? That was the whole point. Like, it's a lot of people that as we get older, taking something risky, like not earning money anymore, it's going to be a lot harder. So the other thing is that I noticed people in FI had issues with is, so what happens when you reach that number? And now what? You start watching Netflix, you start doing stuff like that. No, it's not that. You don't even need to leave your job. So you calculate your number, you figure out how much money you need. And a lot of people don't leave their jobs. If you're enjoying, I have a friend that his company IPO'd, he made tens of millions. He's still working because he's still learning at his job, he's still enjoying it. As long as that happens, why would you leave, right? Unless you have an idea that you're excited about and you want to just do your own stuff, then it makes sense. But having the financial independence is basically the freedom to say no to terrible people, to say no to stupid engagements, and to just be more selective about the stuff you do. So focus is one of the rare things that we have control over, and it's really a really important resource. So when it comes to work-life balance, it's a question of, are you working hard or are you hardly living? In the past, as I explained, I was hardly living. Sure, I worked hard, I achieved a lot of success, but it was a very high cost to me personally. And this is pretty common because we have this hustle culture, right? And overwork is kind of presented like a rite of passage. Like everyone has to pay their dues and they have to work extra hours to get ahead and get better. And I mean, you do have to pay your dues, you have to invest in yourself and learn, especially early in your career, but this is like the way to burnout. And I've been programming for 28 years, and a lot of the times the way I avoided burnout is that I just changed jobs, I just changed projects. And the excitement of a new project or a new company just let me push a little longer, right? But that's not really a real solution. That's like plaster, just a plaster, right? If you have, like, you remember the meme with like the water bucket and the guy just puts up a tape on it, that's gonna fail at some point, right? So when I left the full time, like I was really burned out, and I'm still like, maybe not burned out anymore, but I've been for a year. I have been now working half time at the most. So try to think about the law of diminishing returns. You can probably push 20, 14-hour shifts. I did this for many years, but I realized that even though I get a lot of shit done, I have to pay that. Like, I still have to pay for that. And today I know that, like, if I'm gonna work until very late, especially if it's like before sleep, my sleep suffers. The next day I feel like I am, really exhausted, and even not physically, just mentally. I am not productive. And if you read research, that's actually true. And a lot of the people like cannot work more than 6 hours of productive work. The research actually is even more hardcore than 6 hours. I say 6 hours because in my personal experience, I found that's like a good balance for like deep work, the kind of creative work we do. But in research, sometimes like in some research that I read, it's like 2 hours that people were productive, even though they spend 9 hours at the office. So it's more about figuring out how much you can tolerate and then optimizing for consistency. Like what I want from the teams that I build, I have built companies. I want to have reliable consistency for my team. I want to know what is the, like I don't track velocity, but I want to know how much we can handle and where to say no to product or push deadlines, stuff like that. And if I just push people and then they dropped off, and then I push them and they drop off, at some point, the cost you have to pay is a lot larger. So it's not predictable. Sometimes, like I had projects where someone was like it wasn't my idea, but someone was working nights and they pushed for like a week or two very hard, and then they were gone for 2 months, like non-productive for 2 months. That's terrible business idea. That's terrible for the business. So you want sustainable success over decades, you need to prioritize your well-being. You need to learn how to rest. You need to rest well, because there's also different ways of resting. Watching Netflix might be necessary sometimes, like if you're really burned out, but that's not really the kind of rest that you want to prioritize. And you need to understand what is essential, where you have the biggest impact, and just work smart, not very hard. So rest is not only for recharging your batteries, but it also is necessary for creativity and productivity. Like, if you know how memory is formed, memory is not formed as you read books and you program and you do this stuff. It's actually formed when you are relaxing, where you are off, when you turn off that brain cells. And when I stopped doing so much work, I actually had an issue for a year. In my head, I was constantly here. I was like playing PlayStation or was doing something other that was fun. And I had a voice in my head say, oh, you should be doing something more productive. Like, this is not the best of your time. Maybe do another open source project. That was not very good. And so I started thinking about it differently over the years. And I started thinking about it. It's not being lazy, like playing games or just chilling. It's actually something I'm doing proactively to be able to regenerate, to be more creative tomorrow, so that I can generate more and more output from the same amount of time. Because there is a limit of how much you can work, but you can become a lot smarter in the way you work, a lot more efficient. And this is something I teach to people, to different companies and my course. You would be surprised how inefficient most engineers are. Like, I audit big company projects. Like, I recently finished an audit for like Apple Design Award winner application, and then I also did like one project which had like 1 million lines of Swift. Everyone has the same issues. Everyone is unproductive in the same ways, and those things are actually solved in the industry if you know the right techniques, tools. If you pay like $200 for a bunch of tools, you can save hours every week. It's ridiculous how much you can save if you just know where to look. And even people from Apple, Facebook, Instagram that I worked with, they just don't know those things. So working smart is very useful. You can actually work a lot less. And rest is not something that's passive. It's period where your brain is activated, but not the same way as you do at work, right? So you don't want to be programming your side project. That's not resting. Like if I'm programming daily and then I want to, in my off time, I'm going to work on my side project, that's cool, but that's not actually the resting, right? It's still doing work. It's just more fun. So the idea is that you stimulate your brain in a way that allows you to consolidate learning and memory and all this stuff. And it can be deliberate and structured. Like, don't overthink it. Like, it's not another thing you need to be productive and perfect at, because that's also like I have the tendency to fall into extremes. So I'm not gonna hyper optimize my rest, but I basically just look for things that allow me to deep play. And that means that like I play board games with my friends. And it still requires me to think and do a lot of strategy and stuff like that, but it has nothing to do with programming. So all the skills that I learned for programming, I don't need to use. I can rest. It's fun. It's especially if your close friends are losing, it gets very heated. So it's very different than when I'm programming mostly alone. And so it's a lot of fun to find kind of hobbies. Like improv is really cool. Doing stuff like that. Improv is interesting because I went to improv classes after work, full day of work. I go to improv classes. It's 2 hours. And when I came in to improv class, I was exhausted. When I leave improv class, I'm like so energized because there's so much positive energy. So even if you're doing something that requires skills you might not have, or it's challenging or stressful, it can still be positive for you. So find kind of hobbies that you can do. There's another book that I really like, which is called Essentialism. And this is a very simple idea. You do less stuff, but you do it a lot better. And this is really important today because we are often bombarded with tasks at work and life. And one of the most scarce resources you have is focus. You cannot do 10 things at once, right? That's not going to work. And it is your job as an engineer or any other creative to learn how to say no to things that are not the best use of your time. And I encourage you to learn the business values so that you can actually articulate it well. But basically, find something that you're really good at and invest in that to become even better. Then it's a lot easier to say no to everything else. And if your manager comes to you and says, can you do this, and throws in another task your way, there's a simple question that I ask, and I teach my team to ask is, sure, what do you want to deprioritize? Because it's not saying no directly, so you don't feel bad. A lot of people have problems saying no. You ask them, what is less important? Because that's not going to get done. You cannot just handle increasing amount of tasks in the same hours, right? You just cannot tolerate more. If you try to tolerate more, and what happens? People say yes, they work overtime. A lot of the times we don't get paid for overtime, doesn't even get reported. So the assumption is you can actually do more. So they're going to keep throwing more stuff your way. So it's really important for your career to learn how to say no in the right way. So focus on doing fewer things, but doing them exceptionally well. So that if they think about, okay, we need a new dev tool, I am the person they're going to call because I am the guy that does most of the dev tools in companies. Rather than, doing some feature work, doing something, like I still do it, I still enjoy it, but there is an expertise I have that very few other people have. So if you can find something like this for yourself, it can become the source of most of your tasks. You can actually create your own work stream, which is how I work most of the time in companies. I decide what is getting done. I create those tools. I come up with the ideas. But you really need to start thinking about where you excel, invest more, and then learn to turn down opportunities that will distract you. So where do you have the highest impact, right? That is basically the thing. For me, DevTools, architecture, and a simple reason that becomes a multiplier. If I have a team of 30 and I optimize the architecture of DevTooling for that team, now my impact is, it's like 30 hours per week. If I save 1 hour for a developer, that's a very high impact. So find something like that. Now, how to avoid burnout? Because it's really hard, especially as you keep pushing, as you keep doing that stuff. So what I learned is you need to learn how to have boundaries. Boundaries are generally very important in works, in relationships. it's hard to have boundaries because it's so easy to say yes to more things, to working later, to staying longer for a meeting, all this stuff. And because I worked both in full-time capacity and as consultant over the years, I learned a couple of tips. So, for example, even when I'm only working full-time, I track my hours in Toggle. So Toggle is basically like a simple application for tracking consulting work. And it's free, you can use it for free. And the reason I track my hours even if I'm doing full-time is because I had tendency to work longer than I'm supposed to. I'm getting paid for like 8 hours per day, and I would spend 10, 12 hours because I get excited about something. And if I'm excited, it's so easy to just stay longer and crunch on the problem. But all that time that I spend over what I'm supposed to be working is a time I'm sacrificing from my personal life, from doing other passion projects, relaxing, resting, having a life. So I highly recommend people do it, and then you realize how much you really work, because sometimes you work a lot less than you think. It's just good to know. Maybe don't share it with your team, just good to know for yourself. The other thing that I always tell my teams is use async communications. Like I hate, and probably most of you hate, having tons of meetings every week, especially meetings without agenda. Like I have a rule now that I'm like in a higher hierarchy in the companies. I just don't join meetings without agenda. If there's like 15 people on a meeting and there's no agenda, it's probably a waste of your time. And also, if you have meetings, then optimize them so they are stuck together, so you have longer areas of focus. And there are apps that can do it for your team. I don't remember the exact name. There's like a Google Calendar integration that you can set up for your whole organization, and it's going to optimize your meetings so that you have the biggest focus blocks you can have. I can find it later if anyone is interested. And I hate when someone sends me a message with just "hey" on Slack. And it's very common. People say "hey," and then my FOMO kicks in because I want to help, but if I don't say anything, I'm not going to know what the problem was. So what happens a lot of the times is, because I work with US mostly, is they write me "hey" after my work hours. But because they didn't describe the problem, I'm going to reply, which I'm not supposed to do, and my girlfriend always gets pissed at me because I keep doing that. So I ask my teams, just tell me what the problem is, and when I'm online, I will try to help. It's a lot easier. It doesn't cost anyone more. It's just a better culture. And the other thing you can do is you can block time in calendar for your focus or family time. Always do that ahead of time so that just people don't get too aggressive about scheduling stuff, especially PMs. And if you want to have long-term efficiency, rather than killing yourself for any company, you have to learn how to be more efficient in a smaller time span. And this will allow you to not only enjoy your time off, but it will also teach you how to look for improvements in workflows and tooling that you use. Because if you think about it, if you have to go to the office and stay in the office for 8 hours, you will find things to do in those 8 hours. And oftentimes what happens is people go to Facebook, Twitter, or do other distracting stuff that's not really related to their work. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't have regulated hours, like if I'm consulting, for example, the idea is I need to get shit done. And if I can get a lot of stuff done in a shorter time span, all that extra time is for me. So in a lot of the contracts I had, even if they were like kind of like full-time but not really hour regulated, I basically had tasks to do, and if I learned how to optimize them, I could just spend the rest of the day doing whatever, and I still get paid the same. And it's a case for a lot of people working business to business, because you cannot actually put hours, like tax-wise, you shouldn't have hours in your contract if you're doing business to business. And I got to a point where I could work, for the times I could work 3-4 hours per day, and I was always finishing my sprints ahead of time. Every sprint I would ask for more tasks, and it became a running joke. But that was only because I was incentivized to do it. I was incentivized to be more productive. And this is the story in bigger companies as well. Why a lot of the large companies like Uber, Google reinvent the wheel. Like, so Uber doesn't use sorcery, they wrote their own tool. Because the incentives in big companies is, if you create something like this, you get promoted. So if you have the kind of incentives that drive people to do more stuff, even if it's a solved problem, they will do more stuff, even if it's a solved problem. If you have incentive, be more productive, and you can work less, people will learn how to work less. So I always recommend that. For managing my task loads, I use Getting Things Done. There's a great article called GTD in 15 minutes. Don't read the book. The book is large and unnecessary. And I use Pomodoro often, but I use 50-10 because I find 25 a little too little time for work. And one of the things that's really interesting in research is if you limit your working hours, it actually allows you to get into flow state easier, and you have less distractions. It's the same with training. If you have only 2 sets for a workout, for like a chest, you will really give it your all because you know you only have 2. If you have 10, you might save some energy for the later sets, stuff like that. So in research, it actually shows that if you say, I'm only going to work 6 hours, and then 6 hour passes and you stop whatever you were doing, even if you're in the middle of the task, especially, actually, it's easier. If you are in the middle of the task and you know what to do next, it's best to stop. What a lot of people that do, a lot like writers, like book writers and stuff, what they often do is they stop writing the paragraph in the middle, even though they know the next few words. And the reason for that is the next day, when you need to start your day, you already have the start of the few words. So you already get in the zone, and it's a lot easier to get the ball rolling. The same with programming. I stop my task in the middle, and the next day I know where to pick up, and I just get in the zone, and that's really efficient. And yeah, don't do 12-hour shifts unless there's really like a deadline you cannot avoid, like GDPR deadlines where something we didn't have control over, so maybe someone had to stay late. In a lot of cases, when you work in product companies, deadlines are very arbitrary. And what I always say to my team when they estimate is under-promise and over-deliver. So always be like, oh, I think it's gonna take 6 hours, but I'm gonna say 8. And then you can do it faster, everyone's gonna be happy. If you do it the other way around, no one's gonna be happy. And especially if you work in larger companies, what you need to remember is there's a lot of other teams waiting for the stuff you're delivering. So for example, I'm creating a feature and then marketing has to promote it. So there's a lot of scheduling that goes into place. So when you estimate, always estimate with a big leeway so that in case something goes wrong, no one else is screwed. No other team has to adjust their scope. And if you deliver faster, everyone's going to be happier because you're more productive than everyone anticipated. So good life hack. When it comes to self-care, I think there's a couple of ways you should take care of your body and your mind. I personally enjoy meditation. I work on Headspace, but I today use Calm or Balance. Balance has a 1-year free access if you want. And even real research shows there's like a ton of benefits for 10-minute meditation. It can increase your healing, regeneration. It stimulates your brain. It's just worth doing. I didn't realize that it has sound. The other thing you should do is you should take care of your body because you cannot really expect your mind to be working at 100% if you neglect your health. And today, one of the biggest reasons for that is the obesity. So people getting a little too fat. It's easy because our food is more processed, all this stuff, but it actually has so much bad benefits, side effects for you, because if your insulin goes up, you can get diabetes, and then once you get diabetes, you're kind of screwed. There's just so much negative stuff happening. Maybe you don't need to do bodybuilding or like push really hard. I have a lot of injuries, so maybe just the research shows actually like you need something like 8,000 steps per day. That's healthy. That's not 10,000. The new research is like 8,000. And you need something like 2 hours of strength training per week, and that's sufficient for health. And what I would say is strength training is one of the best things you can do if you read, like I read a lot of research, as you can tell. If you read research, is the easiest way to prevent decline in health and mind. One of the biggest issues when it comes to debt, other than cancer, like everyone is afraid of cancer, but actually if you get your hip injured when you're older, your chance of death are the same as cancer, which is kind of ridiculous because it's really easy to get your hip injured. The best way to prevent that is to have muscles around your hips. So strength training is very, very healthy for you. Also, after 30, we lose a percentage of our body mass every year if you don't train. So training, build up, and then maintain at least. That's really important for long-term benefits. And so, yeah, I highly recommend that. If anyone needs advice, I always help people with that. There's a couple of recommended materials that I used myself to learn all this stuff. Your Money or Your Life, it's really like a staple in financial independence. It talks about the value of time. So I think the lady wrote it, and she talks about, like you have to really consider the hours you spend doing different stuff. Like if you're gonna save a few dollars or a few złotys going to Lidl instead of Biedronka, but you have to drive your car there, you have to spend money on the gas, you have to consider your own time if you're like Biedronka is closer. Stuff like that. Mr. Money Mustache was one of the first IT guys that got famous talking about FI, but he's extremely frugal. I disagree with a lot of stuff that he's doing. I don't think you should fix your own piping and do all this stuff. I highly recommend reading Rest, which is about more conscious resting. Essentialism and Die with Zero were really eye-opening, like Die with Zero more than Essentialism, because I realized I need focus a lot earlier, but I always thought like I need that money. I need to like do the 25, and I didn't realize, well, actually I don't really want to die with money. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. So those are the kind of the books and articles that I highly recommend. If you want to be more efficient, Swift Engineer, I have a course that I created. It's the first indie project that I made after I left full-time, and it's around 7 hours of video now, 70 lessons. There's a couple of different chapters, and basically I teach people how to be more efficient and work less and do the same amount of work or even do more work in less time. And a lot of the people in the industry reviewed it. It actually exploded because it made over $150,000. So I didn't expect it. It really helped with the going indie and like not working full-time anymore. And if you want, there's a discount for anyone here, 20% if you use Mobile Warsaw. I'm still going to add some content. I bought a teleprompter recently, and I'm going to add one more chapter to the course. I didn't even promote it outside of Twitter, so I'm really, really happy with the people recommending. It's mostly like people recommending it to each other that made it successful. But yeah, it's a really interesting course. I don't teach you a specific framework. You can learn that in documentation. I'm not a fan of that. I teach you how to save time in different areas of iOS development. And what I would recommend you do after this talk, I hope it was interesting at least. It's hard subject, like it's finding the right balance. Like balance is important everywhere, right? But finding the right balance when it comes to work and life and career and dealing with ambition. A lot of us are very ambitious. It's not easy, right? You're gonna struggle. You're gonna find issues. And I myself still struggle internally, like, oh, should I do more work, or is this where I'm supposed to be? It's something I actually struggle a lot today. But what I would recommend doing is doing the exercise when you write down how you want to live, when you achieve it, when you make it, when you're successful, and then ask yourself, like, look at that list and ask yourself, do I really need a lot of money for this, or maybe I just thought I need more money because everyone keeps saying like you should earn more and you should make more money or you need more money. Maybe it's already in your grasp. Maybe you cannot retire yet, but maybe you can start working a little less and enjoying your life a little more. And if you prioritize lifestyle around experiences and having time to rest, to have other passions that help you unwind, you will learn that you can be a lot more creative. That's like I created over 20 open source projects for the community, and they're used by so many. Like this is like the thing I'm known for, right? I create ideas. A lot of the ideas I created are not that hard. Like the tools that I created, a lot of them are pretty straightforward. But I was only able to create those ideas because I had space to do it. If you are just sacrificing everything for your company and your work, and that's your only focus, then you don't really have time to unwind and to be more creative and consider, well, what if I did this? And like one of the projects I have is a lifetime tracker, right? It's even more popular than sorcery. And the whole project is just a instance counter. That is literally the project, and there's just nice things built around it. But basically, every time an instance is created, an integer gets increased, and then when the instance dies, it decreases the number. And the whole idea behind the project is you can usually describe how many instances of a given object can live at a given time in the project. So a very trivial idea. The actual code for tracking is like 4 lines of code, and then there's a lot of stuff built around it, but it grew over time. So a lot of the things that you can create to save time every single day are not that complicated. You just need to look for them and have space to do so. So build that space for yourself. And if anyone wants to get in contact with me, here's my credentials. I'm Merowing_. You can find everything at merowing.info. And thank you for listening.